Hello and welcome to the Randomly Generated History Club, where three non-historians pick a year at random and try to learn things about it. I'm Ant, and I'm here with my two friends, Anna and Will.
Hello.
Hello.
This week, we're talking about the year 1066, and as per tradition, I'd like each of us to give a three-word preview of what we're discussing today. Will?
Last Saxon king.
Last... question mark. Anna?
The other invasion.
The other invasion, and mine is Swords Weaving Kings.
Ooh.
Swords
Weaving
kings.
With
I
a full
love it
stop
when they
between
do
them.
that. Oh,
Oh,
No,
okay.
it's not swords that weave kings.
those are some magical swords.
That would be pretty good.
Amazing.
Now, can I say something about 1066?
Uh-huh.
Because in this last week, since we've announced that that's what the RNG chose, I have heard from so many people
Yep.
calling bullshit on it being random.
This is the thing, and
I know.
people don't believe it, but it genuinely
People
is.
don't believe it. I'm giving you an opportunity as the keeper of the random number generator.
Send me their names and national insurance numbers.
I know. And, well, what I keep saying to them is like, it's too early for us to have chosen this one. This would be like going to a killer show and they play Mr. Brightside like fourth in the set list.
No,
Like,
there's so many better years.
we have 3,000 years.
1067, better year.
Oh, can't wait for
Also,
that.
if you think about the years that we've had to do before,
Yeah.
like BCE years,
Yeah.
many of those years have been really, really hard to do. They're not the ones. If we were faking it, we would have faked it with slightly more easy ones.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, all I'm saying is 1066 was random.
Yeah,
It was
yeah, totally,
100%
100%
random.
Okay, great.
Okay, so this week I am going to talk about King Edward the Confessor, who ruled England from about 1042 to 1066. And he is a key figure in history for a bunch of reasons, but probably the main reason is that he was ruling England before the Norman invasion, which happened that year. And it was an argument over who was going to take over from Edward the Confessor that sparked all the trouble that then happened in 1066 and prompted the invasion. So I'm going to talk a bit about him and about his life and try to offer a bit of background on why all the hullabaloo happened.
Nice. It's so nice to hear you talk about an English king again.
Yeah.
It's
It's so
been weeks.
refreshing.
It feels like home.
I have been neglecting. I've done a bit of science recently, haven't
Yeah.
I?
Yeah, it doesn't suit you.
No, it doesn't.
Mysticism,
Battles and
allegory,
jesters and
battles and
kings.
jesters and kings, yes.
So he was born in around 1003 or 1005 in Islip in Oxford or near Oxford, and he was from a noble family from the House of Wessex, who were kind of dominating at the time. And despite the fact that we mainly think of him as a king of England, this was a period when the nobility in northern France and in England and also in Denmark and Norway were all intermarrying, they're all intertwined, they were all kind of mutually invading each other as well and double-crossing and scheming against each other. And so for Edward the Confessor, this manifested in a few ways. So, for instance, his mum was called Emma of Normandy, and she was, as the name suggests, a Norman-born noblewoman.
Named Emma.
Named Emma.
Named Emma, as the name suggests, and that now completes all the things her name suggests.
Yeah.
And she was married to Edward's father, Ethelred the Unready, and also then later on to a Norman king as well.
Why was he unready for? The marriage? For being king?
He was
Breakfast?
He was unready for a bunch of things. He was mainly called unready, and I think this is true of lots of these people from around this time. And they all had, this is also, by the way, this era of epithets.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah,
they were
they're
all
very good.
someone something.
Yeah.
Which we should bring back.
Considering that we had to wait for you to start recording this because you need to finish writing your piece, can we call you William the Unready?
Ooh.
Not to give you a live on-air burn, but clock's ticking.
So angry, but it's actually fairly justified. So he was unready for power, so he took over like a lot of these people called unready because they had to take over when they were 8 years old or 10 years old. So he was 12 when he took over, and so all the nobles were bitching about him, basically. when he
I
took
was
over.
ready to rule a kingdom when I was 12.
Oh, absolutely.
Very precocious.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. If I could just put down my Saddle Club books, I could have taken up the throne of any kingdom.
Well, what with all your reading of ancient books and the close and careful education provided to you by your river nanny,
And the fact you were born into the Wessexes as well.
I was, yeah.
and of course, famously, born into
yeah.
the ancient house of the Wessexes.
Yeah. My epithet is the vampiric, though.
On account of your
pasty
pale skin and hatred of garlic.
Yes.
Okay, so this period, and basically the preceding 200 years really, was one where you had this consolidation of power and the Kingdom of Wessex gradually taking on more and more control over Great Britain. But what wasn't going so well was the whole working out who was going to take over from you thing. And in short, it's a lot like the television show, which people...
The Only Way Is Wessex.
Very good.
Oh, that's good.
And the other one in which people vie for power over who's going to take over from
Survivor?
kings. Succession.
Oh,
The one I have in mind.
Okay, Succession.
And for Edward, this meant that he actually spent spells in exile in Norman France. So, and he was spending his time there politicking and scheming and preparing to come back to take over in England again. And the point being that what ended up happening in 1066 wasn't really... Well, it was just the latest in a long line of things that had gone wrong with the plans for succession over the preceding 200 years. So in that sense, it was nothing new, and it was just lots of kings have had problems in trying to work out who's going to come after them, and there've been lots and lots of fights over who was going to succeed who. And part of that was due to the intermarrying of everything, and part of it was just because they'd lacked a bit of consistency in one particular family, like managing to string together 2 or 3 different successions. So rather than tell you everything about his long life, I will tell you a couple of facts. So, actually, a question here: who now, speaking about right now today, who is the patron saint of England?
Is this a trick question? Because I would say Saint George.
Saint George, I would say, yeah.
But will you say Saint George?
I will say I'm willing to risk the falling into the trap.
No, I think the klaxon's going for you, obviously.
Yeah.
That's not right. I'm doubting myself and everything I've ever thought. It's not going to be St. George. It's St. Ethelred.
St. Ethelred the Unready.
So he was ready for sainthood in the end, yes.
Interesting. Okay. And then second question, follow-up question.
Oh, no.
Where geographically is St. George from?
Not England.
Oh, he's got to be
Correct.
Welsh.
Okay, so slightly dubious in precise origin, but basically the Middle East, Turkey, Georgia,
Yeah, it was the Wales of
The Middle
East.
Caucasus. We're not really sure, but basically not England. So at this point, so George is the exact
Right,
is
so it
the right
it is
answer.
George.
To be clear,
Okay,
Oh,
to
okay,
be clear
good.
now.
Yeah.
But at this time, it wasn't George, and George didn't come about until about 200 or 300 years later, when during a crusade, one of the
killed
kings
dragon.
at the time went and prayed at the shrine in modern day Lydda, and prayed to St. George, and then following that, he was then adopted as the patron saint of
okay,
England
gotcha.
because of the king felt that he was blessed by that saint. So, but at this time, it wasn't George at all. And about 100 years after Edward's death, he was made a saint. So Saint Edward the Confessor was then one at that point of 3 patron saints that England had, along with Edmund the Martyr and Gregory the Great.
Yeah,
And
what was
Agnes the Unwilling.
Agnes.
Agnes.
Yeah.
Was he called the Confessor because he just loved going to confession, very holy, and therefore became a saint?
Yeah, I think it's slightly contested exactly how religious he was, but there seems to be a consensus around the idea that it seems to be pretty settled that he was quite a religious person. He took a vow of chastity, which was fairly instrumental in him not having an heir. I think
That would do
That'll
it.
do it.
That would do it. Yeah.
and he did seem to spend most of his time praying and
Yeah.
and doing religious bits and bobs.
Yeah,
And-
bits and bobs. That's what they do. Yeah, candles.
And actually,
incense,
his rule
and
was
bobs.
his rule was pretty peaceful and pretty, just. Yeah, so that's Edward the Confessor, and then he died in January 1066 and caused the whole hullabaloo that resulted afterwards because of his lack of an heir.
There was certainly a hullabaloo, and I think this now falls to me to describe said hullabaloo.
Yeah, unpack the hullabaloo.
Oh, this was a big hullabaloo for England. I mean, the stars had aligned. Jupiter's in retrograde. Halley's Comet is in full view. The portents
That one is accurate.
That one's accurate. Everything
Yeah.
else I have said
Yeah.
to date on this podcast has been a lie.
Right.
But so this first big event, obviously Edward the Confessor, he's died, as we said. He's got no heirs. And after his death, his cousin, Harold Godwinson, who was effectively in control and in charge anyway as Edward was aging, was appointed ruler and ascended to the throne. This did kick off a lot of interested parties who thought they might be able to claim the throne for themselves. Namely, Harold's brother Tostig, who had paired up with the Norwegian King Harold, who thought that he might have a claim to it as well. So Tostig could have been voted in, but it wasn't. The Norwegian King Harold had this very old agreement with his father's predecessor and the then King of England that they could, if they didn't have an heir, that the other one would inherit the land, etc. And finally, as well, the Norman Duke William, who was married into this sort of heir as well.
Also, the Welsh nobleman Roger the Inert.
Roger the Inert, who never got around to actually leaving Penrith or whatever.
He's just always forgotten in history, so I wanted to make
But he
sure.
didn't react fast enough.
Hey!
He did not react fast enough. So, that's a terrible joke. Anyway, after all this catalyst for war, the Norman Duke William spent his entire life having to fight for his place and position since he's about 12 years old to establish himself in Normandy. So he's a very experienced diplomat, politician, and organizer of armies and stuff. So he was destined for greatness. But first, the Norwegian King Harold had sent about 300 ships to England. But when they landed in Tostig, they had a small battle that they won, and they're invigorated. We're going to take over the place. But the English crown had sent up their troops, and they had defeated them at the famous Battle of Stamford Bridge.
So this was
Yes.
Harold versus Harold?
This was Harold versus Harold.
Okay,
Yes,
yeah. Okay.
Exactly. The Harold Godwinson versus Harold
Harold.
Hardrada, right?
Yes, Hardrada, yeah. Harold the Norse guy.
Okay.
And so the English troops were triumphant, and they thought they could take on the world, and they knew that there was a brewing Norman invasion happening. There's a great plaque actually in Stamford Bridge that exists, that they erected, a very poetic epitaph on it, and it says, "The Battle of Stamford Bridge was fought in this neighbourhood on September 25th, 1066.
Oh, the bards will sing about this day.
Dry, factual,
Yeah.
northern. It is perfect. Anyway, so the timing for this was absolutely perfect, though, for William, because just a few days later, he lands on the south coast of England. And so these troops that are just from battle, they're not fresh, they have to do a forced march the length of England in effectively winter. And they had to then recoup and then face them in battle. And this leads to the greatest battle in the history of all battles that have ever occurred in a small village in the south of England.
In the Hastings area.
In the Hastings area, called the Battle of Hastings. So, firstly, I hope that we're all aware the Battle of Hastings did not take place in the town of Hastings. Are we aware of this?
No, because Americans don't care about this. So
Okay.
all of this is new to me.
Oh, really? Okay,
Yeah.
well,
Really? Did Americans not know or care about any of this?
No.
okay.
Really?
So the
Yeah.
Battle of Hastings took place in Battle.
66.
It did take place in 1066, but in a town called Battle.
Battle?
Is Battle, as in like
Huh.
a battle.
The Battle
Yeah.
of Battle.
Yeah, so it's just a bit north of Hastings. I mean, like
It wasn't called Battle at the time.
Oh no, it was called just a field
be
near
clear.
Hastings.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, yeah,
okay.
yeah.
I was like, that's a little on the nose.
So now, William, please hold your excitement.
Okay. No.
But I'm going to describe to you the battle itself.
Oh, God.
So it's going to be exciting. I really wish I had a whiteboard, so I'm going to have to use some flowery language. I'm going to have to like really bring it to life. And also I think, Will, if in the edit you could sort of bring in some epic music, maybe some sounds of clashing swords, the whinnying of horses, and a trumpet or two, stuff like that. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yes. Copyright pending.
Like
copyright
yeah.
contingent.
Like a Louis Armstrong
Yeah,
trumpet.
yes.
Get Hello Dolly
So the
playing
Battle of
in the
Hastings
background.
was a jazz fusion battle, is what it was. So you're just going to do yakety sax or something, aren't you? I'm going to sound like oh, God.
Yeah.
Okay, imagine the scene. It's a winter's morning in the south of England. Windswept, rainy, mud-soaked fields. Standing on top of them are two armies. In the north, the English under the banner of King Harold Godwin. Battle-proven, but exhausted. Arrayed in formation on the top of Sanlock Hill. And they stood looking over the field, mostly infantry. On the other side, the Normans, professional army. Baying for blood, eager for this. Army of archers, cavalry, infantry, supported by the Bretons, by the Flemish. Devastating capabilities, but at a disadvantage. There are long logistical supply lines. They're far from home. They spoke French. So there's a lot going against them. But their tactic was here. So this steep hill, their tactic was to harry the English with their longbowmen from afar and then push their infantry up in a line. And then holding the cavalry in reserve to smash through them once they get a hole in their defences. But this didn't really work because the archers, when they're firing, due to the angle of the hill, they were kind of going flat into their shields, and so their shield wall held and is extremely effective against the Norman arrow. The cavalry now were taking casualties under the weight of the English axes, these long axes they had, Bavarian axes they were, and having to charge up that hill. At the time as well, in the bloodshed of battle, William's horse had been felled at least twice, we think. And so there's rumours going around, panic had set in, the king was dead, William was dead, so what are we doing here? Let's just, go to Cornwall, take some time off. But what he does is he mounts another horse, probably kicking a knight off that had to now it was an infantry, took his helmet off and then galloped through the line saying, I'm alive.
Okay, so he did an Aragorn.
That's the next sentence.
Okay.
William did an Aragorn. You're reading over my shoulder here. But William decided to switch tactics. He realised that the archers were no longer harrying and not able to get through the shield wall, and the infantry were too slow going up the hill. So he ordered them to attack and withdraw, hoping to lure the infantry into thinking that they would retreat and then do the same thing, encircling them again. The army had been depleted brutally now. Very, very bloody battle, even for the time. And the Normans took advantage of this, but they still held their line until they saw that these knights on horseback were about to fall and decided to push forward.
Sorry, who held their line?
The English.
Okay.
The English.
So the Normans are on horses.
Normans on
English
horses,
are on
charging
feet.
up the hill, back and forth.
Okay.
Until eventually so many of them die that it's like, we can charge them now.
Yeah.
And sort of it broke down from there, and they eventually got through to King Harold himself, and they actually killed him. There was an arrow through the eye that it felled him. Potentially it could be friendly fire in the melee and the chaos, but we're not so sure. And that brought an end to King Harold and also to the Anglo-Saxon reign of England itself. And this heralded on now the rule of the Normans. And William then was crowned king on Christmas Day in 1066. And as a result, a new era of rule had come into place. French was now the language of the court, but this eventually blended with Anglo-Saxon to become modern English.
Yeah.
So it was this combination of French and Anglo-Saxon.
Yay.
And William is regarded as one of the great kings of England. He built fortifications and castles and used his experience from his youth having to work politics and military advantage to solidify the country and uniting it and defending it from would-be attackers, and created a long dynasty of rulers that continues to this day-ish. Sort of. Ish.
There are some pretty dubious breakpoints.
I think there are some very clear breakpoints that we're not going to cover now, but he was pretty sure it was going to last forever.
Yeah, well, aren't all kings.
And that is the story of the Battle of Hastings.
Nice. Now, did people, like your normal English person on the street, did they care about this? Were they really sad that Harold died and this new guy had come in, or did they pretty quickly get in line?
Yeah. Well, if you think of it this way, they all kind of did have legitimate claims to the throne.
Yeah.
So if you're just a regular person, baker, cobbler, it doesn't really matter whose head is on the coin.
I don't know. I reckon it's probably affects you quite a bit because all your local nobles, it's sort of feudal system, right? So they're all all the local nobles and the people who control and own the land, I think, were switched out.
Yeah.
So I think and then a whole.
Interesting.
So I think it probably affected, probably took like a decade or two, I would have thought. But it must have affected
It
loads of
definitely
stuff.
would have affected for sure. I mean, French being the biggest one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is where we get pret-a-manger in the streets of London to this day.
That's right. The first pret-a-manger
First
was
pret-a-manger.
opened in 1067, I believe.
1067, yeah, New Year's Eve.
Yeah,
New Year's Day.
ploughman's. Yeah.
But yeah, there you go. That is, if you ask any English person to name one year ever in history,
Yeah, that's the
that
one
is
you
the
guys
one
know.
year.
That's like our, if you ask any American, we'll say 1492.
Yeah,
which was
which is the
Columbus.
year of Columbus.
Yeah,
Oh,
Yeah.
Sailed the ocean
green.
green.
Sailed the ocean green, yes.
Yeah. Well, that's very cool. Yeah, I think the only thing I knew about it was that it happened in 1066, because even that has reached my shores. So thank you for the history lesson, both of you. I would like to talk about another invasion, a different invasion, also of the Normans, but not of England. So while William is up there conquering England, other Normans are focused on lands to the south, and over a period of decades, they conquer southern Italy, taking little bits of it piece by piece until they unify it. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that. It's a thing I had no idea about either. It turns out I really just don't know what's going on in 1066. So there are a couple of different theories about when and why the Normans first went to Italy. And to be clear, these are just other Normans. They're not related to William. They're just people from Normandy who are looking to the south. So the theories, there are lots of them, possibly involving murder, possibly involving the Pope, definitely involving people with names like Pandulf IV of Capua and Landulf V of Benevento.
And of course, they're
Gandalf.
There's actually a Gandalf.
No, there's not.
Okay.
But
Very
Pandulf
excited.
and Landulf, and I think there's a Randolph, so clearly Dolph means something.
This is where Dolph Lundgren is from. Is he a Norman?
He's an Italo-Norman. So I'm not going to get into the history of why the Normans originally came there, except to mention this incredible fact, which was that at one point, someone was executed via the traditional Roman poena culae. That's my very good Latin, which translates to sack punishment.
Please. He had to take a very wide stance while someone took a long run up, was it?
No, different sack. He was tied up in a sack with a monkey, a rooster,
No way.
and a snake, and thrown into the sea.
I'm sorry, that sounds horrific.
I know,
but
horrific.
That is hilarious.
It's so good. And apparently the animals that they would put in the sack, they would change every time, but there's usually a snake.
You want to get the most comedic combination possible.
Yeah.
Do you think this is true? Is this true?
It is true, because this is a thing that existed in like ancient Rome, and I think at this point had kind of fallen out of favor, but they brought it back for this one guy, which is great.
Back by popular demand.
Yeah. So that's actually not related to anything, but it was just too good for me not to
maybe
share.
we could have a competition where people can vote in and see what animals they want to put in a sack with us.
Before we get thrown into the sea.
Well, yeah, we do have to winnow down the podcasters on this.
That's right, yeah.
Profitability is way down this quarter, you know.
The point is that by the early 11th century, there were Normans in Italy, just like there were monkeys and snakes in a sack. At this time, there are three groups vying for control of the southern parts of Italy: the Lombards, the Byzantine Empire, and various Muslim emirs who controlled the island of Sicily. And then obviously you've got the Pope and the Holy Roman Empire in the mix, because they're just right next door in Rome. And the Normans started out as mercenaries for the Lombards, but along the way, they were granted bits of territory to rule as fiefs, and they just slowly amass more territory and more influence, and gradually they become so powerful that they actually depose the Lombards, and then they're the leaders of the revolt against the Byzantines and the Muslims, trying to just get them all out of Italy so they can have it. There's one family that leads the charge: the 12 sons of Tancred of Hauteville, or Hauteville, I suppose, including such legends as William Ironarm
Oh, yes.
and Drogo. Famously a character in the show
We cannot name.
Succession. Drogo Roy. By the middle of the century, they've got control over parts of Italy, some of these sons of Tancred, and they've drawn the attention, in a bad way, of Pope Leo IX. In 1053, he and the army of the Holy Roman Empire are soundly defeated by Humphrey of Hauteville, one of the 12 sons. Humphrey captures and imprisons Leo, but just 4 years later, when Humphrey dies, his brother Robert Guiscard makes himself a papal vassal in exchange for the title of duke. So the loyalties are just flip-flopping all over the place. The Pope's against them, the Pope's with them, the Pope's with the Holy Roman Empire, the Pope's against the Holy Roman Empire. Italy is a mess in the 11th century. But Robert Guiscard is the man I want to focus on. He is the 6th son and arguably the most successful. He's considered the founder of the Norman Kingdom of Italy, despite the fact that his older brothers played a part, and they were the ones who really started to gain control of the territory. Some personal notes about Robert. His sobriquet, Guiscard, is translated as the cunning, the wily, the fox, or the weasel, which are all really
I
pretty
wish
good.
I had an epitaph.
Yeah, well, you can have the weasel if you want.
I can be Ant the Weasel.
Ant the Weasel. Will the Unready.
Anna the Vampiric.
There we go, done.
Done. A different Anna Comnena, who's a famous Byzantine historian, described him, and I've trimmed down this paragraph a lot because she's over the moon about this guy.
Okay.
So this is the edited version. She described him as having an overbearing character and a thoroughly villainous mind. He was a brave fighter, very cunning in his assaults on the wealth and power of great men. He was a man of immense stature. He had a ruddy complexion, fair hair, broad shoulders, eyes that all but shot out sparks of fire. In a well-built man, one looks for breadth here and slimness there. In him, all was admirably well-proportioned and elegant.
It does sound
Wow.
like she's describing Ant the Weasel here as well.
Yeah, it was either Robert Guiscard, founder of the Kingdom of Norman Italy, or
Ant the Weasel.
Ant the Weasel,
Ant the Weasel.
sitting right next to me. In 1061, Robert and his brother Roger invade Sicily. They easily capture the crucial port city of Messina, taking it from the Saracens, the Muslim rulers. And Robert makes good progress in taking the rest of the island, but eventually meets some resistance from the Muslims and returns to the Italian mainland. A few years later, he goes back to Sicily to try again, but his campsite was infested with tarantulas.
Oh, wow.
And so he had to abandon it, which I love.
That sounds horrendous.
Yeah.
I really hope it was just like the one, but he just couldn't. He just
like,
couldn't
yeah.
deal with it.
I'm out.
I'm out. That's it. I can hate
I
these.
see one. We're done. No more. You can have it.
It was infested, I said.
They were everywhere. But he overcomes his arachnophobia, and in 1072, he captures Palermo, and the rest of Sicily falls soon thereafter. But meanwhile, on the mainland, he's still fighting to get the Byzantines out, and that campaign takes years. He finally defeats the Byzantine emperor in 1081, and in the next few years solidifies his control over the entirety of southern Italy. And his successors build on this work, and the House of Hauteville rules Sicily for more than a century.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I had done most of my research and written this all up before I realized that actually nothing particularly notable happened in 1066. And I can't remember why I thought it did, but I was going back through. I was
Okay.
like, maybe that's when he landed in Sicily. Maybe that's... No, I mean, he was doing all this stuff in 1066.
You're definitely getting a strike from
I
the
know.
RNG.
I'll take it. And
This is your second strike now.
I apologize for profaning the very notion of the
Yeah.
RNG. But this was happening in Italy in 1066.
Some parts of it.
In some parts of it. There were tarantulas.
Yeah, okay.
And yeah, that's it. But at least you learned a little something about the other much slower and much less famous Norman invasion.
So I think it's actually Anna, the unable to follow instructions.
Listen,
Strike 2.
I read the description of Robert Guiscard and I couldn't get him out of my head.
Couldn't get his perfect proportions out of your head.
All his proportions were so...
Even for me, that's quite a distracting
Yeah.
description.
Yeah. So anyway, if you'd like to read my Robert Guiscard fan fiction, you can find that on our website.
We should actually
That's thickhistory.com. Okay, well, thanks for joining us. That's everything you need to know about 1066. Any questions, comments, find us on Twitter, visit our website, Randomly Generated History. But I also do have an email that has come into us, so you can email us at randomlygeneratedhistory@gmail.com. And this one comes from a fan of the show called Kat. And she says, subject line, very important feedback. So rushed to read this.
Oh God, I hope it's about optimizing our SEO.
I really hope so too. Will, Anna, Ant. You asked for feedback on the most depressing city a few episodes ago.
Oh, yes.
And when we were talking about
Right.
Was this Oklahoma?
Oklahoma, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
we were
Oklahoma-
talking about the Oklahoma of England.
yeah,
Yeah.
what's the
Yeah.
Oklahoma? So here we go. You asked for feedback on the most depressing city a few episodes ago, so here's my vote. Hull. I cycled through there once, and it has 0 redeeming features.
Oh,
Looking forward to the next episode already. Love, Kat.
good. What I like about that is that we asked for single word emails, which
Yeah.
that wasn't. That was a bit wordy, but
Yeah.
it was still
Quite
it was
wordy,
still quite
yeah.
succinct and to the point.
Yeah.
Also, we should really respect the city. It is called Kingston upon Hull. It has...
Is that not a different place?
Is that a different place?
I'm pretty sure.
Where am I going on holiday then?
Oh, maybe it's not a different place.
Yeah, I think it's the one. Yeah, it's the one. It's like
Okay.
on a little river inlet. There is nothing of note there. Freedom of the city. There's individual. Desmond Tutu has the freedom of the city of Hull.
Oh, that's nice.
He's never been there. You just know he never went there. No,
Can you just
Nelson
give the
Mandela also never been there. No chance.
Wow.
You can just give out freedoms of cities if you want to anybody.
Hey, I'm going to give you the freedom of the city of Weston under Lizard.
I don't think you can do that.
Why?
I don't. I think I want. If you're the mayor of Hull, and you want to be represented by a well-proportioned weasel, I am willing to volunteer as tribute, and I promise to visit. I will. I'll cut some ribbons
Okay.
on a Pret or
Yeah.
whatever you want.
Get in touch, Mayor of Hull. We've just had a call from the president of Chile, but the line is open now for the mayor of Hull. So. Cool. Well, yeah, 1066 in the bag. Hull has our vote currently as the least impressive part of England. Again, feel free to write in.
Yeah, this is not our opinion,
Yeah.
to clarify.
Oh, yeah,
This is
yeah.
the opinion
this
of
is the
Kat.
opinion of
Yeah,
Kat.
yeah.
We love Hull. And that means that all that's left to do is choose our next year. So, Will, can you please boot it up?
I absolutely can. It is getting up to operating temperature now.
Yep. It's tough now because it's quite cold outside.
It is. It does take more energy.
It's nice that you keep it roasting over a bed of coals.
I do, yeah. It
Yeah.
motivates the tarantulas as they spin its wheels.
They spin the wheels, yeah.
And the next year is 527 BCE.
Oh, yeah.
Why? Why
Why did we calibrate the machine in this way?
have we done this to our? Why has the
We-
club done this to us?
Yeah.
Like,
Of
As
course.
ever, blame Grover Cleveland.
Yeah,
It's
it
quite
really
right.
is.
fault.
If you really want to, go to our website if you want to find out some of the mysteries and history of the club. By the way, Grover
Yeah.
Cleveland is heavily implicated in the esoterica that is the history of this. But
We
Yeah.
are constitutionally required to cover these early years, unfortunately, by the
27
Constitution of the United
BCE.
States and the UK.
I think it's going to be great. I'm ready.
Egypt maybe.
Egypt will be up to stuff. You know the Greeks are in the mix.
Yeah.
Probably other places. It can't just always be Egypt and the Greeks, but
I
it
feel
will
so-
always be Egypt and the... Oh, and the Persians. The Persians
Yeah.
are always...
Thank God for the
I just feel
Persians.
so adrift without some sort of Christian war.
Yeah, that's true. You can talk about a proto-Christian war.
maybe I will have to.
All right. Well, we'll see you then.